philosopher-in-chief of the Lawn Chair Philosophy Foundation, here again, the same night, here, clearly. I had some energy left in me after all that Plato talk, and we're gonna go into Aristotle. So picking up where we left off, Aristotle was a student of Plato's. And he, again, this is just a quick and dirty story. He looks at the intellectual virtues that Plato champions. And he goes, just because you have more knowledge than those around you doesn't mean that you ought to lead, because you can use that knowledge for evil ends, or at least for self-serving ends, and those who ought to be in the ruling elite ought to be there because they have good character. Not only do they have the intellectual virtues, but they have good character. So we're going to work our way backwards here. I'm going to start talking about the politics with Aristotle first, and then work our way back to the individual. Whereas with Plato, I started with the individual and then worked our way to the political. Okay, so Aristotle is after a meritocracy. Those who are in the ruling elite have been tried and tested, and those who are capable of leading ought to be in a leadership position. Now, as an American, I have mixed feelings about this word. If you've done the work and you show good character and you are right for the job, hell yes, you should be put in that position. I don't believe in favoritism. I don't believe in nepotism. I think you should earn what you have in this life. But at the same time, this language of meritocracy is used to keep those who put in the work and who have the talent and maybe ought to be in that position, and they leave them out. For example, the standardized tests that will get you into college, get you into grad school. You've got people in fancy private schools or who are in well-funded school districts, and they might pass the test. Did they do the work to pass that test? Well, I hope so. I hope you didn't cheat. But let's say that somebody who was trained there for 12 years how to take that test does well on that test. And then you have somebody in maybe a poor school district who has a lot of trauma in their background and who is just struggling to survive. They might be just as smart and might have great experiences that would lend themselves to great conversation in the classroom, great insight in the classroom, but they weren't trained their whole lives to take this test. And on top of that, what's being tested for in these tests were designed by people who were already in power. So what they're testing for is more of what's of the status quo. So you look to those people who didn't pass the test and you go, well, it's a meritocracy, you didn't earn it, you didn't pass the test. Well, it's like, well, the test was rigged the whole time. The test only tests for a certain type of intellect that is cultivated from childhood to pass that test. And maybe that child who grew up in a rough environment, maybe even though the test isn't designed for all sorts of intelligences, maybe they have that type of intelligence the test is looking for, but they didn't have the opportunity to cultivate it because they're coming from a rough background. So did those who passed the test and got into college, did they earn it? Is it only on their merit? We don't know. We don't know about that. So that was a little tangent. Meritocracy. Pros and cons. Pros and cons. Pros and cons. Aristotle is all about a meritocracy. He believes those with good character and intellectual virtue ought to be in the ruling aristocracy. Character is related more to heart. Character is something that we develop sort of internally, I'm going to say. It's something that we develop through our judgment and through our praxis. But character, even though it's not something we can see in the same way that we can see physical objects, we can see people's character. Or if not right away, character is something that is revealed and available for the community. So Aristotle is very community-driven, very action-oriented. For Aristotle, the soul is an animating principle. And we want to make sure that the animating principle behind our community is healthy and balanced. Both Plato and Aristotle are looking for eudaimonia. Let me write that out again, just in case. But for Aristotle, the mean that we're looking for is relative to us. He does make use of the mathematical mean that Plato finds in his good and his rational good, but for Aristotle, he takes a more grounded approach to rationality, and he does have, instead of 3 layers of the soul, there are 6 layers, and he does believe in a certain rational part that goes on into infinity. But the whole soul is an animating principle, and we want to direct that soul to the development of character. The development of character will involve intellectual virtues, but the intellectual virtues take a second seat to the development of heart, good heart and character. And good heart is always community-oriented. Okay, so let's take a look at the development of character in the individual, and then we'll go back to the polis. Okay, so for Aristotle, we have potential, not like potential energy, but it's akin to potential energy. We have certain capacities, a certain potential that we want to actualize. We want to actualize our potential. And everybody has a unique potential. Potential is potential is potential no matter who you're looking at, but each one of us has our own unique gifts and capacities. You know, at this stage, he's not saying that someone is better than anybody else, but that we all are special and have unique potential. And to achieve eudaimonia is to actualize as much of this potential as you can. So we want to actualize it. So we've got our potential, and then we have what is actualized. Our character, if we have a good, strong character, we'll be able to actualize more potential. If we have a weak character, we're not going to actualize as much as our potential. So let's look at how we're going to develop that character. We do so by building good habits. Aristotle does not want to reduce our character to habits, but we will need habits in order to build this good character. And we will need to have good praxis in order to achieve that good character. So let's break that down. I want to give an example of playing drums. For Aristotle, we're going to need a craft. Some sort of art, to be an artisan. In some field or science or what have you, we're going to need a craft. For me, that's playing drums. Our ultimate goal, of course, is to be happy. We want that eudaimonia. But we want to to have a good life, we want to be at first, we want to focus on being good at whatever this craft is. So for me, my ultimate aim is that I want to be a good drummer. So there are going to be lesser aims or lesser ends, goals for me to achieve, that will allow me to reach this bigger picture in the end. So I'll just kind of break down this larger goal into smaller tasks, and whenever I can achieve these smaller goals, then I will be a good drummer. So what do I need to do in order to be a good drummer? Okay, I need to play with the metronome. Gotta get out the met. I should be able to read sheet music. Now maybe some people are like, you don't need to be able to read to be a good musician. Well, just follow me with this example, for heaven's sakes. Let's say this sheet music. You know what? I need to know my rudiments. I need to know my rudiments. Gotta play them to the met. And you know what? I gotta play well with others. Gotta network. Nobody wants to play with you, even if you're technically stellar. Nobody wants to play with you if you're an ass. So be a people person. And we're going to want to unite these through sort of community service. What makes a good drummer? Is somebody who's drumming stuff that people want to listen to. So these goals are already community oriented. This isn't to say that we reduce the definition of a good drummer to values of your particular community. No, but if you're playing stuff that nobody wants to listen to, you're not exactly achieving your goals of being a good drummer. Okay? So we've set out our goals, but once we set out to achieve those goals, that's where life comes in with problems. Like, oh, okay, all right. You know, I've got my sheet music. I know what my rudiments are. I'm pretty good with people. People like me. All right, let me get this. Oh gosh, this metronome that I need is expensive. I'm operating in a time before Google. You can just Google metronome and one will pop up for you. Anyways, oh gosh, in this scenario, I need to get a job in order to pay for this metronome. Okay. So I get a job, but oh gosh, I'm so tired from that job when I get home. I don't feel like looking at this sheet music. I don't feel like talking to anybody. I don't feel like playing my rudiments. Oh no. Now you've got to figure out how to balance all these aspects of your life in order to get these done. That's how you build up discernment. Or good judgment. Now, Aristotle has this whole system of judgment, and he's got a whole series of causality. I might get into that. I love tangents. But for now, let's just stick with this very simple type of discernment. How am I going to, in this context, become a good drummer? And this is where the mean relative to us comes in. He makes a distinction between a mathematical mean and a mean good to us. So you know what? If you are rich, you might not have the same problems that I do in achieving these little goals. You might be a little more distanced from the community because everybody else up in this bitch is struggling. So you will have other obstacles to overcome in becoming a good drummer. So we want a program. In order to look at this context and set forth to achieve our goals, I'm going to create a regime or a regimen, some daily habits that will allow me to achieve this good. This regime might not be good for everybody. So this is where the mean relative to us distinguishes itself from the mathematical mean. According to Plato, the good is universal and eternal. Aristotle's not going to go that far. He's going to say that the good is relative to us. I'll get to what that means on the communal scale in just a bit, but I think this is pretty approachable. Like, okay, I want to achieve these goals, but there are limits to my context, so I'm going to create a program and build daily habits so that I can achieve these goals. So the regime for me might be getting up early so that I can go to work. Maybe I got to drive for Lyft. Let me get that morning shift, and then bring my lunch with me, practice my rudiments in the car, take a quick nap, then get back to driving. And then I get home by, I don't know, 7 p.m. I still have an hour or two until the neighbors are going to start to complain. Then I can get this work in. Make sure I eat somewhere in between there. I don't know. So if I commit to those habits and build good habits and stick to them every day, then I start to build without realizing it. I'm outwardly focused on achieving these goals and sticking to this regime that I've created for myself that will help me and might not help some other people, but it will help me achieve these goals. I start to build good character. I can commit. So that character gets stronger and stronger and stronger every day as you stick to that regime. So again, habits are going to play a crucial role in building good character, but let's say my circumstances change. Then my regime might need to change. Then my habits might need to change. Hey, maybe I might come into some money. Let's all wish that for me. Right now, let's take a pause and we wish good things upon me. Okay, and yourselves, include that. Let's wish good upon all. Let's say I get some money. The same habits that I built when I didn't have money might not serve me so well. So I'll pick a new regime whenever my context changes. So we will need to self-reflect from time to time along our journey to make sure that our regime is still serving us in our context, because context changes. This life is determined by an animating principle. Our circumstances will change. So what you can commit to these to this regime, to achieving these little goals, and to serve the community. That's built in for Aristotle, that we are serving the community with this craft. Then we build a good character, not only in terms of our fortitude, but in terms of our relationship to the community. Now, whether it's actually the case that as we go about trying to serve our own purposes that we're automatically community oriented, I mean, I don't know. We could accidentally be maybe sacrificing our artistry by just playing what people want to hear. You know what I mean? So are we serving the community because we want to present something original and something wrenched from our hearts and souls, and here you go, and they just so happen to like it? How genuine is our relationship to the community in this whole scheme? That's what I'm trying to ask. I'm going to leave that up to you to decide. But here's just a little recap. We want to actualize our potential to its fullest potential. In order to do so, we should really focus on one craft, a narrow little sphere through which the whole bigger world will become apparent. So we build a global understanding of ourselves and our world by trying to achieve a goal pertinent to a craft within this world. The world reveals itself through the problems that we face along the way. And as we make a regime that fits our context and will allow us to achieve this good, we build up a character, and other people can see that character. Look at that, Kelly Birchfield over there, overcoming so much adversity and still being a good drummer. Yeah, we like that girl. Yeah. Okay, now we take this model and we scrutinize it for something a little bit extra when we are determining who ought to be in the ruling elite in this schema. So just because I am good at my craft, again, I brought this up before, does it mean that I am really selfless in my goal achievement? I don't know. In order to be a ruling elite, we need to have a selfless character. Selfless. And not only that, we need to actually be able to perceive the needs of the community and selflessly serve those needs. So we need to have hyper refined judgment. We need to be able to see through and past our own desires and little goals and look at a greater goal for the community. And to be able to serve that and go, man, without going, man, I'd rather play my drums right now than serve the community. So who's got a strong enough character to then leave their home world of drumming, or whatever your home world is, and to serve the community in a leadership position? That's going to take a little bit extra. And it's hard to tell whether somebody has that selfless character unless they've been tried and tested. So just because you come from money or come from power or come from the high heavens, wherever it is you're coming from, doesn't mean that you have a selfless character or even a strong character at that. And just because you are good at your craft doesn't mean that you should then become a political leader. Yeah. So let's take a look at the extra focused discernment that a leader in the ruling elite will need according to Aristotle. Now, before I go into that sort of discernment, I'm going to go on that tangent. I'm going to go on that tangent about his causal system, because if you are to be in the ruling elite, you need a strong, selfless character, but you also need intellectual virtues. Again, everyone will build discernment and intellectual virtues by just problem solving within their own little world, achieving their own little goals. But you need a little bit of extra discernment in order to be a good political leader. You need some scientific knowledge. So you need to know not only the needs of your community and some very particular needs that fit the context of your time and space, but we also need to know a little bit about metaphysics, okay, and a little bit of logic. I'll leave the logic for another day. I do have a video on that, but so Aristotle has his causal system. You can also hear a little bit more about this causal system in the Aquinas videos. Okay, so we have the final cause, we have the formal cause, we have the material cause, and we have the efficient cause. They're all causes, they're all ends. So we typically think of a cause like, why did you do something? Because, and that's the cause. Or why did that person have to go to the hospital? Well, let's figure out the cause of this person's illness, But causes are a little more nuanced for Aristotle. Each of these is a type of cause. So the formal cause is the shape that something takes. The material cause is the stuff that is made into a shape. The efficient cause is the means by which some stuff is configured into a shape, and the final cause is the purpose. So let's just say I've got some, like a pile of wood. I got some wood. I'm going to make a chair out of it. It's going to be this shape. Make a chair. How am I going to do that? Well, I'm going to use my own elbow grease. And, some nails. and a hammer might be helpful, or glue, you know, whatever the process is by which you will manufacture that chair. So it involves the person who's making the chair, the act of hammering or gluing, just the steps that are taken in making this chair, and the purpose for sitting or for throwing, or I don't know, there's so many things that we could do with a chair. The final cause, we can have fun with that. But he's got this he's got this causal system. So we're talking about chairs here. What if the stuff that we have is a whole community, and we want to shape that into the best community, a stable community, one that lasts, one that is healthy, one that is moderate, where everybody's getting a little bit of what everybody else wants. We want a space where drummers can achieve their goals to be good drummers, and where doctors can be good doctors, and where teachers can be good teachers. Wouldn't we like a system where teachers could do their jobs? Wouldn't that be great? Let me not get sidetracked again. Okay, so we can take this final cause, formal cause, material cause, efficient cause, and apply that to a community, which I know that is a slippery slope when thinking about other people as a resource. There's a way to do that without devolving into slavery, you know. And this is where I think Kant has something good to say. You know, we have to work with each other practically. We have to go about our business and treat each other as a resource, to leverage each other, to help each other achieve goals, but we got to make sure that we don't lose track of people's humanity. And I think that Aristotle would say that a selfless character won't think of people like pawns on a chessboard. You know, we're thinking of people as resources in an enlightened way here. Okay, so we're going to apply this causal system to the community. So this community, it's going to involve, your resources will be, you know, hey, we've got good rivers here, we've got good soil, we've got the smartest farmers here, I don't know, maybe we've got some really good shoemakers, some cobblers here, I don't know. Maybe you live in a mountain. It's like, you know what, our ground, it kind of sucks. Not much can grow here, but you know what? We've got some really good artists, and the stuff that they make is worth something in that world market. You know, so each community has its strengths and its weaknesses. You need to be able to see what material you're working with. What's stuff here. And as a good leader, you're also going to know your own potential, your own talents and capacities. And we're going to divide this community up. So let's say you've passed the test, you're a selfless individual, you've got good discernment, you understand metaphysics and logic, and you can grasp the animating principle beneath the whole community that's going to allow all of the little animating principles that represent each individual soul and their own actualization. You see how all those parts fit together. And you see your talent, and you're like, you know what? Frank over there, he's really good at farming, so we're going to put him in charge of the farming. I'm really good at legislating. I'm going to be in charge of the republic, or whatever form. Aristotle believed that the best form of government is an aristocracy. Most Western philosophers are going to say that a demos, a pure democracy, is bad. You know, he's got a system where he says, you know, there's democracy, which is chaotic, and then there's parity, which is where you truly have equals and they're working together. That usually will work out in a small community. Then there's monarchy, and there's being a tyrant. You know, maybe some communities really do need a monarchy, but you don't want a tyrant. But the best form of government is typically an aristocracy, according to Aristotle. You know, he might say that some communities need a parity, some governments might need a monarch, but it's typically an aristocracy. A meritocracy, of course, but we don't want to fall into an oligarchy. That's what we do not want. So I probably should have written those terms down. You're fine. So anyways, we have a ruling aristocracy, one that follows the principle of meritocracy, and we're looking at each of the leaders in the group and seeing what their potential is, how it is they've actualized that potential, look at their talents, and to see who's an expert in what. You know what, Bob over there, he's really good at being a merchant, so we're going to put him in charge of the seaports or whatever. So you see, we're going to divide up this material community and put different leaders of the aristocracy in charge of different segments so that we can all work together to achieve the purpose of the community, which is to be balanced and to be healthy and to make sure that everybody's ends are achievable, that as many people are actualizing their fullest potential as possible. Yes, 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 yes. Okay, so yes, so in order to be amongst the ruling elite for Aristotle, not only do you have to stand out in your chosen field, but you have to be able to set that aside, set your desires aside, set some of your needs aside, and to be able to see this whole for what it is purely and simply. Now, I said earlier that the world reveals itself to you from your little space of your craft as you as an individual set out on your journey to become good, to be a good drummer or a good chair maker. You know, you find yourself a mentor and you're doing that, and the world reveals itself to you along the way. Okay, yeah. But to be a good leader in the aristocracy, you need to be able to see this whole beyond just your own little world. Now, of course, Aristotle's going to recognize that we are viewing this world from our own perspective. There's another tangent I could go on about phantasm and the imagination. I'll save that for another video. You know, those who are ruling elites not only have strong hearts, that's the first requirement, you gotta have a strong heart, but they have developed intellectual virtues beyond the practical discernment that masters of the craft, whatever that craft might be, have achieved. This is where the mathematical mean will come back into play. We want to make sure that, again, we have a just state. Now, justice for Aristotle will involve a little bit of punitive justice. So people must be punished, but he was more of a fan of restorative justice. So what was taken from the victim and how might the perpetrator balance things back out again? He was a bigger fan of restorative justice than punitive justice. Now, when it comes to rebellion, he was all about that punitive justice. You commit a crime against the whole state, here we go. We're going to punish that. We're going to put your head on a pike, and we're going to make you an example, metaphorically speaking. Aristotle was a champion of changing the form of government if need be, but according to Aristotle, you've got to go through the proper channels. You can't just be rebelling and leading an insurrection. No. There's a chain of command. And if those at the top are like, listen, we heard you, and you know what? You've got some points there, but we can't just change the whole system based on that one complaint. Sorry. And then if you go and try to stage a rebellion after that, no. But there is room within the state to use the legislative tools available to make small changes, according to Aristotle. Okay, so anyways, punitive justice does play a role in Aristotle, but he's more about restorative justice, and here's where we need to think about balance. We need to bring in ratio and mathematical means in order to apply balance to a correction and to the establishment of justice. So to restore balance, we need to bring in that mathematical mean. We're going to use it within our context, and so the mean relative to us always takes precedence over the mathematical mean, according to Aristotle. And we also want to use the mathematical mean in conjunction with the mean relative to us in terms of distributive justice. So, how are we going to divvy up the resources of society and make sure that we are fairly distributing that to everybody? I like to use an example of an athlete here. So let's say there's a famine, and we've got stores of grain in our silo here. That's my silo. Here's our stores of grain. According to Plato, or at least if we're going to apply Plato in this way, this is how Aristotle would think that Plato would apply his theory to the situation of a famine. We've got our stores of grain, and so everybody gets an equal amount of grain each day based on a 2,000 calorie a day diet. Now, would Plato say that? I don't know. But that's how Aristotle would think of Plato's use of the mathematical means in terms of distributing resources amongst the community. Aristotle would say, no, we got to think about people's actual needs. Like an athlete might need 6,000 calories a day, 8,000 calories a day, and maybe someone might need 1,500 a day. So give me the 1,500 a day, and then where we have extra because I didn't take as much, we can give that to the athlete because they need a little bit more. So that sort of reasoning, that sort of judgment, that sort of discernment is more involved than deducing from the math. Here you go, 2,000 calories a day, everybody gets that. Don't question me. Hold on, that's not using reason, that's not using judgment. To really use your judgment and your reason is to look at what you have, look at the members of your community, look at their needs, and make a judgment based on that. And it won't be perfect. It won't be perfect. But it'll be better than blindly following a formula. Okay? So justice for Aristotle will also look like balance. He wants us to achieve eudaimonia, but how we get there looks a lot different than how Plato gets there. Now, this isn't to say that there isn't a sort of spirituality to Aristotle. Again, there are 6 layers to the soul, and the top part is rational, and it infinitely exists in all of eternity. It might go on after you die, but Aristotle is much more grounded. Raphael, that painting, I wish I can't work this gosh darn projector screen. There's the School of Athens by Raphael, and you see in the center of this symposium scene Plato with his hand up, and then Aristotle with his hand down, which is supposed to represent that Plato believed in this heavenly eternal good, whereas Aristotle was more empirical, or basing his reasoning off of experience, whereas Plato was more mathematical. Now, I have seen these memes go around with the basketball spinning on Plato's finger, and then Aristotle's palm in the basket. I think that's great. I don't have enough time to edit these things, so just go look that up. But I hope that suffices, this comparison between Plato and Aristotle, both quick and dirty accounts of their accounts. Stay tuned for more videos.
Now, before I end this Aristotle video, I do believe we need to take him to task a little bit harder. I straight up call Plato's governmental system fascist. So let's not let ourselves forget about Aristotle's contribution to fascist states and elitism. Now, both Plato and Aristotle believe in a ruling elite. Hence, their systems are developed to support that elitist system. And again, while I do believe that you should earn what it is that you have, you should work hard. And those who are in leadership positions, they ought to earn those positions. I do have issue with the elitist undertones, or maybe just straight up overtones of Aristotle's meritocracy and his own caste system. So while Aristotle's divisions of society aren't as clearly laid out as Plato's, Aristotle's audience is an elite class. And in fact, he does not want the different classes to be friends with each other uh, in the sense that you would be an equal to your friend. He believes that, higher falutin folks in the caste system can befriend lower folks in terms of you can work with them, you can be a good master to your slave, but that you're never an equal to someone lower than your station. So let's mention that, and let's mention the logos behind Aristotle's system that justifies his political thoughts. So just as Plato has his divine method and his order of the forms that justifies his whole belief system, his whole philosophical practice, we have logic as a science and as a rhetorical tool in Aristotle. Aristotle's rhetoric is often presented as a sort of equalizing force that through logic and his rhetorical methods, everybody can phrase themselves in such a way that everybody else can hear what they're saying, can smell what they are stepping in. That's just not the case. Theoretically, maybe, but not everyone has access to this science. Not everybody is within the elite academic institutions receiving this formal training and knows how to present themselves in a logical way. Now, in logic, you have this concept of validity and this concept of soundness. While you can present an argument in a valid way, and acquire some sort of limited theoretical abstract truth, does that truth correspond to truth in the real world, big T truth? Well, that's a different story. However, if you do not phrase your big T truth in the proper format that's laid out in the science of logic, then you can't achieve truth within this communicative community that is bound by the rules of logic and rhetoric. So think about an example in a courtroom. Let's say someone, a plaintiff maybe, we'll call them a debt collector, might be presenting a lie, a straight up lie, or if there's any truth to what they're saying, it's so technical and limited that out in the real world, we would not call that truth at all. But say you are a defendant in this debt collection scheme. If you do not present your case, no matter how true and real that case is, it won't even be heard by the judge unless it's presented in the right lingo and in the right format. So logic is a good thing to learn if you're going to ever defend yourself in court against a debt collector. Don't ask me how I know. But what if you don't have access to that science, access to that knowledge? Does that mean that your truth, the story you're trying to tell, is any less than the one that's being presented by someone who has logic and this rhetorical system in their tool belt? Here's where that system of meritocracy comes into play again, and how it might be used to repress the truth instead of sharing that truth. So Aristotle's system of logic and his meritocracy, uh, while it can be freeing, it's not accessible to those who desperately need that freedom and who are being subsumed by those who are using this logic. Um, and this logic, the practice of it has been honed for thousands of years by the same ruling elite. So this actually brings us to an issue with the lawn chair philosophy's foundations. Really, we're sitting here teaching these dead ruling elite philosophers. You know, we need to include other voices that either challenge that status quo or who don't even reference it at all. They're just brand spanking new voices. Um, I want to be very careful in how I share the historical narrative as it is and as it's being challenged. I feel like I mean, it's more than that. I feel like I know that this narrative that's been handed down for centuries, thousands of years, about the heroes of Greek philosophy and these great thinkers, that narrative needs to be challenged, but we also need to know it on its own terms because it is upon that narrative that our systems of governance and our cultural institutions find validation. Um, so we should know logic, not only because it's fun and not only because it's interesting to explore the foundations of science. Not only is it a great tool for exploring our belief systems and prejudices, there are also spiritual elements to logic as well, whether it be Plato's logos and divine method or the science of logic. We can use that to ascend inductively or descend deductively in a spiritual way. Um, we also need to be cognizant of the great societal ills that have been committed through it. Whenever we learn logic uh, to explore ourselves, let's not subsume our voices beneath it and correct our natural way of speaking, at least from a place of harsh judgment. Um, and uh, let us be cognizant of how we use that logic. Once we are in the know, are we then using the tools available to us, handed down to us from these institutions in order to create positive change within those institutions and potentially just get rid of what's unnecessary in those institutions altogether? Or are we just perpetuating that system? So by telling this narrative of the Western canon, you know, are we contributing to the further sedimentation of elitism and of these elitist practices? I hope not. I hope that by sharing logic, we're sharing some fun, we're sharing some spirituality, and we're sharing tools that will allow folks to navigate through these institutions and cultural practices that keep folks down. And I'm hoping that by sharing these practices and this narrative, this logical framework, that we can also tear down some of these elitist institutions by the very means historically used to support them. And then what's next once we raise the ground? I don't know. I don't know if the ground could ever be totally raised. I'm starting to go on a tangent. But since I have a logic video out there, since I'm a fan of the philosophy of science, and since I do have this feminist bent, let us take Aristotle to task. His system of meritocracy has its pros, but also its cons. And the cons, I think, need some attention. Whether that attention be logical, we'd be very meta then, or whether we analyze his system through other vehicles, poetry, music, fist fights. I don't know. Anyways, that's it for my tangent and my tirade now. See you next time.